Operation and the White House operation. But let's talk a little bit about North Carolina specifically. Unemployment rate there is 9.7%. Both houses of the state legislature flipped from blue to red in the 2010 midterms. President Obama, the candidate, has a lot of work to do there. President Obama, the president, is also proposing some programs that would fit with his broader policy fabric, if you will.
You know, since the beginning of this administration, I've looked at the schedules that the White House sends out, and I've been like, wow, he's going to North Carolina again. He announced that Iraqi troops were coming home in December. Where'd he do it? Fort Bragg.
He did indeed.
So interesting how much time he spends there. And I do think that's part of the story of this campaign. My colleague Jackie Combs had a great story documenting this the other day, which is that there are a lot of presidential trips that are essentially political in nature, and that line really is disappearing in this administration.
I think that in her piece, in Jackie's excellent piece, which was, I believe, this weekend, she talks about a recent trip to Florida, which included a 34-minute speech to talk about the Buffett rule, which some people have said is a campaign piece to begin with, at Florida Atlantic University, which was sandwiched between 3 fundraising trips to the area. The question is, how much of this is sort of obvious political campaigning and is inexcusable if the American taxpayer is on the hook for it? And how much of this is, look, the president isn't going to get anything done in Washington. This is a part of politics that is sort of inevitable. He's going to have to spend this time campaigning and raising money so that he can get reelected and actually do something in 2013.
I mean, I think there is something to that, but I do think that this is the line blurring, as Jody put it, I think was pretty well done. That having been said, this is something that every past president has done, or recent past president there's been an issue about. There were issues about it with Bill Clinton. There were issues about it with George Bush. I think the difference here and why this president gets more focus is because he campaigned as so not that way initially, and so I think that it calls a lot of attention when he turns out to do things that are, you know, shocking political, that a politician behaves in a political way. I don't think any of these things are surprising on their own, but I don't think it helps him in terms of trying to seem bigger.
Yeah, it's harder for him than for other presidents to say, oh, this is how everybody does it.
That's right.
Because he's not supposed to be everybody else, or that's not how he ran.
I distinctly remember a speech the president gave in South Carolina as a candidate right before the primary there in 2008, and he was running against Hillary Clinton, and he essentially stood up and said, the problem with Clintonism is that it's a permanent campaign and that there's no line between campaigning and governing, and he scolded the Clintons in almost moral terms for that.
We know that compared to President Bush, Bush attended 97 fundraisers during his entire 2004 election cycle. President Obama hit number 100 in terms of fundraisers on March 1st, according to the always accurate Mark Knoller in the White House. I do want to ask a little bit in terms of how the campaign mindset may or may not be affecting White House strategy. And we have I think we have a little full screen of who's where. In Chicago, you have David Axelrod, he who likes dropping the phrase kabuki theater. Jim Messina, campaign manager, and Stephanie Cutter, the deputy campaign manager. In Washington, you have Jack Lew, who's chief of staff, David Plouffe, senior advisor, and of course, Valerie Jarrett. Who is really calling the shots here? I mean, are there 2 distinct operations, Jody?
Well, of course. I mean, in terms of, I think they're careful to obey, you know, the various legal rules and whatnot about separation. But I do think that after the 2010 midterms, the White House really re-engineered itself internally for re-election. Like, for example, they had goals of doing 100 events for this demographic or 100 events for that demographics. And there were spreadsheets inside the White House in which people really ticked off how many they were doing. So it's funny because often when you have a campaign headquartered in one city and then the president in Washington, there are all these questions like, will they coordinate well together? Will there be a disconnect? Nobody is asking that this time around.
Well, especially